So in effect, fuel is a kind of amortization vehicle. It's financing. You don't have to put all the money down. It's a kind of mortgage. You pay some up front. Most of it you pay as you use. With renewable energy, there's no fuel. And so all the pricing around the cost of the fuel is based upon the fact that you've got to put 100% down, not 10% down. And so the cost of your capital has an enormous, exponentially disproportionate impact on the cost of your power. Could we go to the next slide? This is an example, and I know it's a complicated spreadsheet slide, but we design portfolios for cities, and this is a wind farm. On the left-hand column, you have a privately financed wind farm. On the right-hand column, you have a publicly financed wind farm. All the factors are the same. The only factor that's different is the fact of its public financing. And if you look down on the third row from the bottom, you'll see the cost of electricity from this wind farm. The privately financed wind farm is 11.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The publicly financed wind farm is 6.8 cents, just under 7 cents. So the difference in cost of green power is dramatically lower. I mean, that's around 30% lower when I look at it. Next slide, please. So the real core phenomenon is that lower cost of capital for a capital burdensome technology. The second is the rate setting authority that is created through community choice aggregation. This allows a city to decide how it's going to charge for its power. That is, how much will residents pay, small businesses, medium businesses. It allows the city to attenuate more complex energy products, to not merely sell electricity to you as a consumer, but to finance an energy facility for you as an owner. It allows the community to effectively finance your energy future and to invest, and that you see on the bottom there, to invest in demand-side technology. So, and this demand-side technology is a poorly understood and underappreciated category of energy. I want to, in the blue there, you see virtual capacity. The word virtual capacity is already cheaper than coal. Now, virtual capacity is a relatively new term of industry and energy, and it emerged from the so-called power purchase agreement, or PPA, approach to selling technology that's emerged in just the last few years. I know that some of you are aware of this, the emergence of third-party finance of photovoltaics in the U.S. It's captured the market. A great deal of the new growth in solar photovoltaics is coming from companies that approach customers not with a proposed sale of solar panels, but instead with a proposed sale of solar power, on-site solar power. So you receive an offer from a solar company not to buy panels, but to buy power from panels on your roof. We'll put it on your roof, we'll pay for it, we'll sell you the power for X number of years, and we'll take the federal tax cut. We'll see to it that the system pays for itself, and once it pays for itself, we go away and you own the panels. It's kind of a new deal in solar, very popular, lots of growth. If you take it to the next level, which is what we're really doing here, you're issuing bonds to finance solar, so you have a lower cost of capital, and you're not limited to photovoltaics, which is a relatively high cost renewable resource. You can invest in demand-side technology. Now, demand-side technology are energy efficiency, more efficient lights that you appear to have here. Demand response technology that effectively automates energy use in buildings. A public housing apartment building with 1,000 refrigerators can receive refrigeration pump automation systems that serialize the pumps so that they're not all on at the same time. So the carbon profile for refrigerators can be dramatically reduced. The cost of service to the building, because the peak load on the building can be cut in half, is reduced, so the overall cost of energy to the building can be reduced. These technologies, which are off the shelf, they've been around for decades, are so cheap that if you finance them and level and convert a sale of equipment into a levelized cost sale of power, called virtual capacity, it's cheaper than coal today. The ability of cities to finance technologies that reduce energy use without lowering the quality of lighting and heating in the building at prices that are cheaper than coal is truly a radical opportunity. Now, one would ask, well, why aren't the utilities doing it? Next slide, please. By shaping supply and demand, really a new game in energy becomes achievable. No longer are you simply trying to replace a brown power plant with a green power plant. In fact, any of you may have read James Lovelock's work. James Lovelock is a British scientist who led the charge to revive the nuclear industry in response to the climate crisis. Why did he do this? Because he's a scientist, and he studied the basic arithmetic of carbon. He looked first at wind power, because wind power is known to be the cheapest renewable resource. So he assumed this would be the most logical place to start for achieving a carbon solution. Upon cursory study, he realized that wind power is a radically limited technology. Why? Because it relies, generally speaking, upon transmission to deliver it into cities from remote locations. Renewable resources are intermittent. A commercial wind power facility produces power between 20 and 30% of the time. In other words, between 70 and 80% of the time, it's not producing energy. Now, they're still viable economic investments. However, from a carbon perspective, they become physically limited in terms of how much carbon reduction they can deliver. Effectively, they're limited to a 20 or 30% solution. He observed this himself, and he said, okay, well, let's look across the board here. What else could we do? Solar photovoltaics. He looked at solar. He looked at the current growth curves of solar, the current role of solar in energy markets. It's nothing. It's on the scale of the pet rock. It's a tiny, visionary, potentially radical, but currently insignificant component of energy markets. The scale of energy markets is really the problem. And to get significant carbon reduction in those markets requires such a transformation that any rational person looking at the carbon arithmetic will realize it's just not probable we're going to get there based on that technology either. So he was essentially, Mr. Lovelock, driven into the arms of nuclear power. He saw no alternative. He's not an irresponsible man. But I studied his work. I read every book that he wrote, and I did find some flaws in his thinking. The first flaw was that he didn't look at demand-side technology. He just isn't on the list. He's a supply-side thinker. And lo and behold, look at the climate discussion. It's all supply-side thinking. It's, we're going to go from brown power to green power. It won't work. You can't do it. It's physically impossible to achieve. And that's what the utilities will tell you. It won't work. It's impossible to achieve. They don't look at the demand-side technology either. Why don't they? Very simple economics. They own the transmission lines. Most of they are energy importers. Transmission lines are energy importation systems. The primary investment of electric utilities and the primary profit center of electric utilities is transmission systems. They make money like long-distance companies, not really from burning, but from delivering. And what Mr. Lovelock realized was that you just can't get carbon unless you actually reduce throughputs, unless you reduce sales. If you reduce sales, then all the entities of the world, public and private, that own transmission systems are in deep trouble. And it's profound trouble. It's not a casual problem. It's not a moral problem on their behalf. They truly own debt attached to these assets, this infrastructure. You'll notice today, many utilities are saying we need more transmission to deal with the energy crisis. They want to build more transmission. Now, this is a carbon nightmare. To the extent that the energy system is further centralized, bigger systems, larger systems, as if the energy shortage could be solved by having bigger pipe, this sort of metaphor of the energy crisis. The carbon implications are devastating. In fact, the only way to get significant amount of carbon out of the system is to decentralize the system, reduce dependence on transmission, phase down centralized power plants, and build up local power generation, and invest heavily in demand-side technology, dramatically and heavily.